Okay, so I want to make my own animated short film. How do I even start to make that happen? First, I need a story and a world with characters. Check. I've been exploring this idea for like 2 years and I'm currently storyboarding the full story with a mentor with the support from a grant by Helpman Academy. After so much exploration of this world, I have a lot of concepts, references, and visual ideas to work from. I want to make this film with a very tactile and painterly approach, something that fits with my fine art background and skill set, and something that embodies the kind of work that I love. My favourite films are the ones that are absolutely dripping in style and expression. Work that might look maybe a bit less polished or perfect, but it's way more charming because of it, at least in my opinion. Some of the influences for my story and visual language are directors like Robert Eggers, Wes Anderson, Tim Burton and Guillermo del Toro, and projects like Arcane, The Nightmare Before Christmas, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, The Sandman, Piparia, there's so many. Stylistically, German Expressionism and Art Nouveau have become two really central references for this film. It's not so much a conscious choice, but they just reflect the themes and mood of the story so well, they kind of just emerged. Before I jump into any final animation though, I really need to figure out how I'm actually going to make this thing. My goal is to eventually create a pilot for this film, and that means testing, failing, and figuring out a workflow that I can realistically handle on my own. That's where this 3D test comes in. The next logical step, if I stand a chance of making this pilot, is to do a small animation test. I decided I wanted this test to be in 3D, using 3D models and assets, but painting them and mixing in 2D elements to give everything a very painterly, tactile look. I feel like this approach could fit the style I'm going for really well, and it lets me inject my own background and personal expression into the work, hopefully getting the best of both worlds. I'll be honest with you though, that's a little scary because I've never done this before and my 3D experience isn't great, but that's also what makes it exciting. When you're doing something new and unfamiliar, literally anything could happen, unexpected problems, but also unexpected discoveries, and that's the most fun. So let's get into it. For this test, I knew I'd probably be using more than one piece of software. My dad works in the VFX industry and specializes in Houdini, and from early on he strongly suggested that if I wanted to push this test visually, I should at least try finishing it there with a lot of guidance because I don't know what I'm doing. That meant I needed to think ahead and prepare my work in a way that could eventually go into Houdini. But first, I'm starting in Blender. I've used Blender before, but I'm honestly pretty rusty and still wrapping my head around a lot of the basics. So before starting this test, I had to go back and reacquaint myself with the basics. I'm really glad I took the time to do that. I needed it. After that, I was keen to try one of the tools that I've been very curious about for a while, Grease Pencil. And when I tested it, I was kind of mind blown. I love how intuitive and free it feels, especially coming from a painting background. Being able to draw directly into a scene like it's 2D, but then have it exist in 3D space, that's sick. I think Grease Pencil could play a big role in my workflow for this film and the style that I'm aiming for. So once I felt like I had some kind of grip on Blender again, I started working on the actual test. First, I need a set to shoot this test in. I've never done set design before and definitely not in 3D, so this was going to be a learning process. I gathered a lot of references from Pinterest and my own concept art. This room is a central location in my story and I've explored how it could look a lot, so I'm really excited to try and make it real in 3D. I'm building the basic structure, honestly, in the most inefficient way possible. I was doing a lot of trial and error and struggling a lot at the beginning. It was a mess, but eventually things started to come together. For one of the stylistic elements, I used a Blender add-on called Deep Paint. It allows you to turn grease pencil drawings into meshes and models, which is perfect for the sculptural kind of hand-drawn look I'm going for, especially for crooked lines and imperfect details. Another big step was painting the environment, almost like a 3D painting. Blender's tools have improved a lot, but they still have some limitations from what I understand, so I downloaded a free add-on called Paint System. That one lets you paint with layers, opacity, and a more Photoshop-like workflow, which made things way easier. Until Blender started lagging like crazy. Why is Blender lagging so much? Oh, reflections and refractions and stuff. That makes sense. Whoops. There's a lot of things that might seem obvious to people who have done this for a while, but they're absolutely not obvious to me. I've spent entire days stuck on something super basic, only to realize later that it's a simple setting that was breaking everything. It's really quite a learning curve. But somewhere during the set design process, something actually clicked. Blender started to make more sense, things ran smoother, and it was working out. And honestly, for my first 3D environment ever, I'm pretty happy with it. It's janky, crooked, and imperfect, and it looks like it was sloppily drawn by hand, which is exactly what I wanted, and it works in my favor. Okay, now I need a character for this scene. May I introduce you to the creature? This character is central to the story, and I first started drawing him when this idea first appeared a couple of years ago. I even made a small 2D animation test of him about a year ago. It's pretty cool how things have evolved since then. To make him in 3D, first I need to model him. Luckily for me, through my dad and an internship at his studio, I had access to a very advanced human model from Side Effects called Otto. I imported Otto into Blender. He comes with everything: organs, bones, skin, nails, teeth, detailed eyes, but I only needed the skin and a few core eye elements. From there, I went into sculpt mode to smooth and move things around to fit my character design and the simplified style. I was careful not to change the topology, since that would mess with Houdini settings later, like rigging, and I want to save myself the trouble if it's already there and ready to use. I was also experimenting with some details on the skin, like ridges and patterns. I was curious how these would look later with texture painting and lighting. Speaking of, it's time to paint this dude. I painted him in Substance Painter, which I had access to through my dad again, and oh, what a godsend. I really like this program. I painted a few different versions of the body and the eyes, experimenting with color, line work, and brushes. I realized afterwards that I didn't set the resolution high enough, so it's a bit pixelated and I was struggling to paint the details how I wanted, but that's fine, we move forward. I did really like the effect I managed to get of shimmering scales by painting them on a layer set to no color but roughness instead, so they're like shiny patches that reflect light when he moves. Okay, that's good enough for me. Time to move on to the hair. I didn't record anything, whoops, but I started this process in Houdini. The setup for hair in Houdini is crazy. My dad set up the technical side so that I could start placing guide hairs and build the hairstyle, adjusting density, clumping, frizz, thickness, and so on. It was honestly getting super confusing, so I eventually brought it back into Blender and I literally gave my creature a haircut by grooming the hair I had and brushing it around, shortening it and lengthening it and adding clumping. Nothing fancy in the end, just good enough for it to work for this test. Also, we're probably not even going to see it in the render, but I imagine my creature with sharper canines, so I added them. Might come in handy later. Okay, the time has come. I was experimenting with layering the character materials in Blender. I'm going to have to do this all over again in Houdini anyway, but I learned some valuable knowledge by tackling some issues I had. I also wanted to paint another layer for these dotted details. Looks cool? Okay, nice. Exporting my set from Blender was initially not working and I had to figure that out. It was pretty frustrating. I tried exporting it like 13 times and could not find the issue. I eventually figured it out with ChatGPT and found that my objects had hidden animation data. I don't even know how that happened, but it was messing up my scale and rotation and location. That's why everything was coming out so messed up. So I eventually figured out how to take that off. Once that was fixed, we were finally in Houdini. The first step is to bring my set layout and character together and to add some simple animation. Again, nothing fancy, just something minimal for this test. Unfortunately, transferring some of my work over from Blender to Houdini was quite problematic and frustrating, especially trying to transfer over my painted textures that I did earlier in Blender for the tank room. Even with my dad working on it, it required so much code and hackery that it was taking longer than the painting itself. So I eventually decided it wasn't worth it and to scrap it. I'm actually a huge perfectionist, but I'm forcing myself to just go with what I've got, even if it's far from perfect. I have to keep reminding myself that this test is to just see how things come together and to see if I can even do it so that I can do it better next time. Noted for next time though, I really have to organize everything better and name my textures properly because that was part of the problem. Instead, we applied some dark material to most of the pieces in the room and I would have no idea how to approach doing this in Blender, so I had to leave it to my dad to add some glass material with refraction and emission and other qualities to the inside of the tank and the outside walls that are kind of like stained glass windows. Most of the lighting comes from the tank itself, since I wanted the creature to be backlit and mysterious, but we added another light so he wasn't completely blacked out and some refraction to the cornea in his eye. Then some very simple animation on the camera backing up to reveal more of the character in the scene. I was actually animating the focal length and the zoom, not the position of the camera, to compress depth and shift towards a flatter, more orthographic look. So with that, I'm happy to call the first test finished. here's how it turned out. It was definitely cool to see my character that I've explored so much in 2D come a little more to life in 3D, and it was an exciting opportunity to experiment with an industry-level software like Houdini. But if I'm being honest, I was completely lost in Houdini and entirely reliant on someone else to set things up for me, which is obviously not ideal. Going forward, I think I want to focus on and explore softwares that are maybe less high-level, but feel more intuitive for me to use, like Blender. All the buttons in the world aren't useful if you don't know how to use them. To actually progress towards making this pilot, I need to be able to problem solve on my own and have real creative freedom. And actually, the more I learn about Blender, the more I realize how powerful it actually is, and how so many people have made really incredible things with it. If they can do it, why can't I? So I'm already working on another test, but this time in Blender, and I'm very excited about how it's going so far. Thank you to my 5 epic active patrons for supporting my project and the making of this film: Sinju Christian, Caitlin, Silence1X, Ethan Mitchell, and Vishnu Rao. I'm sure I'll be documenting the next test as I work towards making this film real and making a pilot. So I'll see you then.